Hi everyone, it's Guillaume from Startup Basecamp. Welcome to the Tech for Climate podcast. During the show, you will have the opportunity to meet the best climate tech founders, investors, and experts from both Silicon Valley and around the globe. They will share with you their stories and personal journeys into this growing and exciting industry, giving you some insight into the ecosystems that help you to take part in the fight against climate change and benefit from the opportunities it can represent. The podcast is divided in two small interviews. During the first part, you will get to know our speakers, their perspectives on the climate crisis and how climate tech is changing the game. The second part of the discussion will be for members of our community who will learn the speakers' secret sauce on how to and share with you their unique expertise on topics such as fundraising, management, strategy, and so on, to help you to become a better leader in your field. So before we start, I would like to quickly share what we are doing at Startup Basecamp to support climate tech founders in accessing resources and gaining visibility with investors they seek. Our initiatives include a membership-based community platform offering access to a dedicated Slack group with a growing number of founders, experts, and investors from around the world, and a series of exclusive content such as interviews, weekly job listings, events, and our quarterly online pitch of night opportunity. But more than a place where you can learn, exchange, and grow, we are building a matchmaking service to facilitate connections between our members and top investors and experts in the field. And soon, alongside with other top investors, we will be launching a small fund to co-invest in the growth and acceleration of our members. Finally, all of this is possible because of your support and donations. We are a small self-funded team, and we want you to be part of this collective movement against climate change. So please share one episode with a friend and subscribe to the channels. As an added bonus, we will plant a tree for each of our subscribers each time we reach 1,000 new fans or donors. Do not hesitate to connect with me via social media or email guillaume@startupbasecamp. Thanks a lot for listening. I hope to get in touch with you soon. And now, let's go for the show. Hi everyone, in today's episode, we are speaking with Sophie Purdom, co-founder at ClimateTech VC, the weekly newsletter on climate and innovation read by more than 15,000 investors, entrepreneurs, and network shapers. I was excited to have Sophie on the show and learn more about how she teamed up in March 2020 with Kim Zou, who originally started ClimateTech VC as a blog, and how together they built a fast-growing climate tech reader base, serving their readers consistently with high-value content, tons of emojis, and listening to their audience feedback to improve their work with a product-focused approach. This episode, Sophie will share an overview of the climate tech ecosystem today. Then she will put her own investor hat and share which sector, according to her, are the most promising today in terms of impact cash return, or ICR, meaning the sectors building impactful companies while creating highly profitable business. Finally, Sophie will share a few words about what she would say to people feeling doomed by the current climate crisis situation. Then we will conclude the talk with what's next for ClimateTech VC and how you can be involved in their initiatives today. In the second part of the show, Sophie will give her secret sauce for founders seeking to fundraise, as well as her insights on how to maintain a healthy work-life balance as a founder and an investor. Finally, she will share her thoughts on the incredible role women are and will continue to have in the climate change fight. Sophie, welcome to the show. Hi, Sophie. Welcome to the Tech for Climate podcast. We are super happy and excited to have you here with us today. So before we start, as usual, can you please give us a 30-second introduction about ClimateTech VC?
No doubt. Glad to be here. Thanks for having me. Love to share about ClimateTech VC. 30-second version. Let's see. We got started. Well, first of all, I should say what we are, right? So we are a newsletter. We see ourselves as the leading source of information on, of course, the facts. So the news, the deals, the events that are happening in this booming climate tech space, but also we help you think about how to think about it. So we bring you the facts and then lots of frameworks, including market maps and deep dives, conversations with leading founders and investors and change makers in the space. And we're read by 15,000 subscribers, all of whom are making a big impact on climate tech, mostly from the early stage innovation angle as investors or operators. We also have a jobs board now, and we're launching a whole suite of other products. So think of us as your leading news source, and we drop in a fair amount of emojis. So try to keep it fun as well.
Fantastic. So excited to learn more about all of that. So let's start from the top. You know, can you tell us a bit more about your story and background? Maybe anything also specific that it's not public yet, but that you like to share about yourself. And I mean, who is Sophie? You know, more than a successful co-founder of ClimateTech VC.
Yeah, dropping the secrets early in it. I love it. Who is Sophie? So Sophie, I've always been, throughout my whole career, I've focused on climate. And that's taken me across a whole bunch of different paths and wearing a bunch of different hats. So I studied it academically at Brown University and helped to set up an institute. So hub of professors and students to study the intersection of environment and society, and use that work to really dig deep into how do business and climate go hand in hand. And I was a little bit of the black sheep at Brown, which tends to prioritize some other more social angles for making change and leaves business out of the equation sometimes. But, I grew up running a business with my family, and it's nothing glorious. We didn't leverage and raise venture capital, that's for sure. But I totally understood where the dollars and cents came from. We were running an e-commerce distribution business, and I worked on that through college as well. So I was trying to balance personally this, what I was doing to kind of fund my college experience, if you will, and how my family made ends come together with my study of climate, which felt very high level. I was lucky enough to go to the UN climate negotiations a few times and work on policy with state legislators, and just brilliant access and opportunity. But the realism piece wasn't always quite there for me. And I figured maybe there was something at this intersection. And so now I've been working at that intersection. I can kind of like see back, right, ever since then. So first helping set up a ESG fund, so environmental social governance, back when that was not as popular as it is today, at the Brown University Endowment. Taught a course on sustainable investing with a very close friend of mine, Carrie Krosinski. Carrie and I wrote a book together on sustainable investing, and trying to push forward this, the facts and the frameworks around this nascent space. So I was doing that. I took a bit of a detour, if you will, and I went to Bain, the management consulting firm, for a few years, skilled up, and then left to go directly back into strong climate impact, starting a business. Felt a bit like a science project, if you will, at the time, but is now a company that's doing really well. I'm happy to share, called Kula Bio. And Kula is a deep tech agricultural technology business, and our product is a fertilizer. So we make ammonia, but we do that through a completely different process. We make ammonia using microbes. Also turns out that our fertilizer, which the plant prefers, by the way, and is about the same cost as synthetic, very polluting fertilizers, is the same cost, and it's a carbon sink. So that's true climate tech, but we weren't calling it that then. And so fast forward a little bit, right around when the global pandemic hit in March of last year, I was thinking about, where do I want to sit and where do I want to apply my skill sets moving forward, and recognized that ESG had taken off, but was very much focused on avoiding the worst. And I wanted to work moving forward on solutions, and that meant more innovation and probably earlier stage company building and investing. And that's when I started thinking more about climate technology. I'm a big believer in this is a pretty small world and all of the loops kind of keep overlapping with one another. My author and close friend, Carrie Krosinski, put me in touch with a woman named Kim Zou. And Kimberly had just kicked off this blog, and she called it ClimateTech VC. And Carrie said I needed to chat with Kimberly, and we met, virtually. It's pandemic times, and started writing together, not with really any intention other than synthesizing all of our own thoughts and probably spending too much time like reading news and engaging with folks in the space, and wanted to get that out there. Of course, fast forward now almost 2-ish years later, and ClimateTech VC is a true organization. There's lots of folks that work on it behind the scenes. We publish twice a week, real like tomb of information, and it goes out to 15,000 folks, like I said before, and is seen as the leading source of news and information on the space, which is a real honor, and also has personally given me access to shift from being a founder into more of a capital deployer. And so that's the hat that I wear these days as a climate tech investor, and happy to share more on that. Super passionate about it, and have thought hard about how can you have the most impact in the climate tech space as we're in a real boom time.
Fantastic. So before we go too much into detail of all of that, and I feel like based on your story and based on your journey, you had the opportunity to have like a lot of like aha moment. But do you have any aha moment that you can describe that really pushed you into, in a way, the climate tech industry, or all of them really pushed you to ClimateTech VC? Which was your aha moment?
Good question. For me, it definitely was not one interaction or thing that happened or deep insight that I landed on, but rather I've always been climate first, right? So I actually think this is, maybe it's pseudo like generational in some ways, but it's always been very obvious to me that climate is the thing that my generation, our well-being, livelihoods, future hinges on. And I've always wanted to work on that. Frankly, I'm British, you can't hear it so much anymore, but I grew up running around with like hay bales in the British countryside and have always had that connection to nature. Life has taken me many different places, but that's a passion, and I found a way to study that academically. And then frankly, that got self-reinforced, right? I got access to people I wanted to be around and conversations I wanted to be a part of, and opportunities to step up and lead and grow, foster within the climate space, in part because it was a good fit for my inherent skill sets, but also the space was growing really quickly. And so it's always been, it's always been me and climate. And I feel really privileged to play a role in helping communicate and push forward kind of the future of this space. So maybe, but of course, little inflection points along the way that mostly hinge on people. So meeting people or building something with people. And this is a real community play. So wouldn't be here without all of those many aha moments with phenomenal folks.
Fantastic. So let's zoom out a little bit and step back here. And maybe, ClimateTech VC is sharing so many high valuable content about the ecosystem. So you're probably one of the best to ask right now, like what is to share with us like this overview of the climate ecosystem today. I mean, where are we at, and what needs to happen to have the climate tech industry or ecosystem being able to fully support the 2050 net zero goal?
Well, we just wrote something about this. So, and I'll back that up by saying, one can feel emotionally, sometimes physically, like the increasing pace of action in this space, investment, building, policy, etc. And I'm a data person. I wanted to quantify it. And so for the past 18 months, we at ClimateTech VC, which is myself, Kimberly, and our amazing team, have been hard at work gathering data point by data point, pretty painstakingly, even when we didn't know what we were going to be doing with this information, real-time tracking of announced venture level deals in climate tech. So that required us defining what the ClimateTech space was, what are all of those subsectors, like what are our boundaries around that, defining what is the right kind of like asset class. So what stage are we going to track, verifying that information, categorizing it, et cetera. And so we had this big database in the background. Frankly, you know, folks could build it themselves if they went through all of our issues and recorded information from our deals section. But we got to a point where there's enough information there and there's enough interesting trends that it was time to publish it. So we put out this piece, and I guess some of the high levels are, you know, high level interesting stats are that over 18 months, so it's, you know, say from, let's see, it would be Q2 2020, so right around the start of the pandemic is a way of thinking of that, through to Q2 2021. So that's technically 5 quarters. We've tracked 1,000 unique investors, so different funds, or rather different firms that have all collectively participated in funding 600 unique venture capital climate deals. So, you know, I think it's something like 550 or 500 climate tech companies, because it's been long enough that folks are out there like raising again. That's a ton of activity, and the pace is what's really interesting. That has like all of our metrics are like up and to the right, for good or for bad, moving faster into present day. So to give you a sense of that, you know, there were on average about 100 unique deals being done every quarter across sectors in climate tech a year ago. Now there's 50% more. So there's over 150 that were done in Q2 2021. So literally moving 50% faster. And that's the N. So that's the number of deals. In terms of the dollar value, it's much higher. So on average, the deal size by stage a year ago was smaller in every single, you know, stage of deal, seed, A, B, you know, growth. But most notably in Series A deals, it was, you know, an A deal 12 months ago on average was literally half of the amount of capital that's being raised for an A deal today. So 14 million on average versus 24 million on average now. Growth is 3x bigger. And again, these are averages. The median is close enough that this trend still holds, but 130 mil on average versus 380 mil on average now for growth climate tech deals. So the number is increasing and the size of the individual deals are increasing, which means the total value, the total volume of dollars deployed into climate tech is pretty exponentially taking off. So we see over 9 billion worth of deals in Q2 2021. And so in total, you know, we've been tracking 16 billion just from our mid-year reporting so far.
That's fantastic, and thank you so much for sharing this overview of the 5 last quarter, which is very, in a way, very short term in terms of the timeline. But do you have any insight of like what's next? What needs to happen to really close that gap? Do we need like 10 times, 100 times more investment? Really, what's like? How do you see the ecosystem in maybe 2030 from now? So like in 9 years from now.
Yeah, and when you say close the gap, there's lots of different, you know, anchor points we could be going off of. So are you referring to, for example, like reaching a net zero total economy or hitting the Paris Accord targets? What are you anchoring on?
I mean, I think the ultimate goal is the 2050 net zero goals as of today, because that's where, and ClimateTech probably won't be able to support fully that. But when can we believe, and maybe it's a question that is like really difficult to answer, but when are we going to reach an ecosystem that's mature enough to really see like the impact in terms of CO2 reduction? Because we're still at the initial stage of, in a way, the effect, the positive impact that all of those technologies that are financed right now can have in terms of CO2 reduction. if you know what I mean.
I do. So this brings up two big points. Like to contextualize everything that I'm talking about, it's in a niche. So niche number one, I talk about innovation. So bringing new technologies to market versus deployment. And I hate to make this black and white because there's a lot of gray in the middle. We're working in the part of the market that's going to be deploying maybe, minimum 5, more likely like 10 years out down the line. So even though there's a lot of hype and talk, us included, talking about the innovation side of the market, the rubber hits the road, the steel goes in the ground, the emissions are getting sequestered today, mostly on the deployment side. Most deployment is happening through different asset classes, think project finance, infrastructure, debt, credit. And so I think that's just important for like listeners of climate change technologies are being implemented and having an effect right now through deployment. There are new technologies coming to market that hopefully will be more efficient, cheaper, better, whatever, able to access new markets and new solutions, make it, more user-friendly, that are in the innovation stage at the moment. So that's one. And then the other piece is, similarly, I focus on venture capital, a very, very small slice of, total capital deployed, or total assets. And so my co-author, Carrie Kersency, has a great saying about this. It's basically like essentially the cost of everything, or like we need everything. And he has a beautiful Meko graphic that shows for ESG funding, what's the relative size of all of this ESG capital. And venture is a tiny, tiny, tiny little, less, it's basically 1% or less, like within that whole market. And we shouldn't leave off all of the other important asset classes that are really going to be driving us to net zero. So long way of saying, like, think about this in terms of the type of technology and then the type of financial asset class that we're really talking about. And climate tech is a very specific part. It's fun. It moves quickly. Lots of deep tech and cool founders happening in it. But by no means is venture capital, climate tech going to be the thing that gets us to a net zero economy by 2050. It needs to work in tandem with other asset classes, improve its role in supporting that, especially since the climate innovations can't get to market and cross over those many valleys of death without alternative types of financing.
Thank you so much. I think it's very, very interesting. So let's go a little bit now more specific to ClimateTech VC. Can you let us know a bit more about like the story you already shared, this initial connection that you had with Kimberly and how she started. So maybe tell us a little bit more about like how did it start, like this first months of journey, and why in a way maybe she started, or what did she share at that time to say, okay, you know what, this is really like something that should be out there and is not existing today. And then you can probably like share a bit more in detail about like the different services that you guys are providing. I saw this recent ClimateTech job board that you released. That's super cool. So tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah. So ClimateTech VC was originally Kim's brainchild, and you should have her on to tell the story another time. But essentially, she had graduated university after studying climate and economics, and was working as a iBanker at a big bank, and didn't find a single source of information on that intersection of innovation, more venture capital and climate, and threw out the webpage, and then we met and really kicked off ClimateTech VC together. So started as a blog that was like in part an exercise for us to synthesize tons of inbound, overwhelming, conflicting kind of like information on climate and innovation and fundraising, and try to sort it out. And by writing in public and by holding ourselves to a standard and working together and listening to our subscribers, that went from less, blog to more like product, I suppose, quite quickly. So I have experience writing and I care a lot about communication. And I think there's a certain editorial voice that is a good fit for readers in this market. So we made sure to hone that and talk to people as if they were quite expert, but not in a dry form. And so we keep that voice, and we continuously survey and interview and engage closely with our readership, and in turn, they engage closely with us. So have, our readers have developed some serious habits around opening the newsletter. We publish the kind of what you need to know newsletter on Monday mornings at 6 a.m. Eastern. And we've been very consistent in always publishing it then. I don't think we've ever strayed from that for the Monday publication, and that consistency pays off. So obviously there are folks across the world that read the newsletter, so it's not 6 a.m. everywhere, right? But when we publish it, I think about like half of the readers will immediately open it within an hour of it hitting their inbox, which to me means like they're waiting for it. And this is a core part of how they start their week. They want to know what's going on and what do they need to know. And we're proud to be able to play that role. So that's kind of a little bit of the like, how did we get started? We started this in the beginning of the global pandemic, and stuff like this, and interactions over Zoom were not common, and so folks were at home and more starting to become like more digitally curious or digitally native, and that allowed us to pick up the phone and talk to really like anyone. We had more access to people than we would have if we had to like schlub our microphone to San Francisco and sit in the office with some folks. So definitely some luck around market timing and trends towards like kind of globalization and digitization. And that gave us access, which then, access begets access. So leveraging some of like my contacts from working in the ESG space for a long time. And it's a nice thing you're experiencing this. I'm sure it's like the domino effect of folks want to see who came before and match themselves up against that. And we come in very prepared for all of the conversations that we're having in these Q&As, and consistently, I remember like good friend like Mark Tersick, who formerly was the CEO of the Nature Conservancy and at Goldman Sachs for a long time before that. And he was like halfway through our interview, he was like, okay, got it. I'm gonna like, we're having this level of conversation, right? Like, let's level it up. So earning the right to have those introductions, and then really maximizing and making the most of that access is how we hold ourselves accountable. And I hope that shines through. We're really writing and talking to folks who are active in climate tech and consider themselves like somewhat expert. And we're talking to them as if they are expert across a whole breadth of kind of like functional and subject and technological areas. But we're not dry, like we'll sprinkle in a lot of Easter eggs along the way. And I love when folks find it and then they're emailing us or texting us or messaging us or on social, and it keeps things active and live and frankly pretty fun. So and then one last piece of, we had started as a newsletter. We're still technically a newsletter, but really we're a resource. We're a resource and like a set of other products moving forward. So we've put out so much content at this point that less the Monday, like what you need to know, what's the news, but more the Friday features, the market maps, the Q&As, the deal deep dives. Those are being mostly engaged with when we push them out, but then continuously engaged with over time as folks search for them or keyword and go back and look, or SEO and there's new viewers coming in. And so we've realized that it'll be important for us to categorize that and make it more searchable now that there's such a volume of quality content that stands up over time. So we're revamping way of delivering that. We're shifting services to push the content out to you. And then obviously we're going to, on the back end, be completely redesigning the way that you engage with ClimateTech VC when it's not just in your inbox. So stay tuned on that, and check out the jobs board as like an example of some of those other products that are going to be coming out. Just crazy levels of engagement on that I hadn't anticipated, but clearly our readers want more.
Definitely. So just a little bit on the content in itself. I mean, you guys have been, as you mentioned, producing incredible amounts of high valuable content. And I'm the one of, part of your audience on Monday, opening your newsletter most of the time. So that's, and waiting for it. So that's very exciting. And thanks for putting that together. But in terms of content, I mean, tell us a little bit more about like, how do you plan those topics? I mean, do you have like a specific editorial line? I mean, at first, you can always like map the ecosystem, but then after you go, and I think that's something very challenging as well, is to produce highly valuable content that is fact-checked and that is accurate. So who helps you on that? Do you have a team, or do you have like co-writers, or tell us a bit like the secret behind that?
Great question. Yeah, there's a whole process behind it. So you're right. This has moved from being like a sprint to publish, the next week out. As soon as you've published on a Friday, sprint to the next Friday. It's not like that anymore. There's a whole mechanism behind it. So yes, we plan out feature content in about 3 months in advance. And so that's mostly Kim and I thinking deeply about what are we investing in, right? Because we wear the journalism hat, but then we take that off and we invest for both of our day jobs. So we're thinking about what's coming up in conversations on the investment side, where do we not have full access to information, which probably is indicative of where others are curious as well. And we are in literally 24-hour constant communication 7 days a week of chatting about those topics, and then who is expert on that and who would we go to kind of like upskill. And then we have a little kind of template or approach of reaching out to folks and saying, hey, we're going to write about this on this timeline. Do you want to come in and either be a co-author or separately if we're asking for comment? We have a separate process for that. Separately, if we want to feature them in some way, there's a separate process for that. And then there's a kind of product stack, I guess, like behind all of those that make it easy enough to collaborate with so many different folks all at once across so many different topics on so many different timelines. So it's a lot to juggle, but there's always a point person, and the folks that we feature are good friends and co-investors and folks that we really respect. So it's always an excellent use of everybody's time, and we have really high NPS, if you want to call it that, on coming on the newsletter and engaging with us. So my friend Paul, who's the CEO of a company called Remora, that we did a lovely Q&A, pretty easy, like Paul's a great guy to interview. You basically don't need to do much editing on the back end when Paul's speaking, because he speaks like he's writing a book. He's eloquent and fantastic. Paul came on, we did a Q&A about his company Remora, which makes mobile carbon capture devices for semi-trucks. Easy to wrap your head around, like it's a nice hardware product. And we published that piece, and they got an incredible amount of outreach and engagement with readers from that, including with national labs and large companies that are now purchasing their product, and folks that applied to work at Remora, et cetera, et cetera. So it's really important to us that it's not just benefiting the newsletter's brand, but really first it's benefiting the folks that come on. Like who are our customers? We're lucky that we've chosen again and again and again to not monetize ClimateTech VC. And so that frees up some of the thinking about like who are we serving? We're always serving the community first, as opposed to trying to, serve our own bank account or whatnot, which it's crazy how much time we spend on this side hustle, but it pays off. It pays off in other ways. Let's put it that way.
I'm sure. That's a good segue for my next question. Like, what's the current business model? I mean, you guys are spending so much time. So how do you finance yourself? And what's next for ClimateTech VC? I mean, what's your maybe bigger vision and the steps that are required to make it happen?
Yeah, so we've chosen to not monetize ClimateTech VC, and I'm a data person. I did management consulting and private equity. Like, trust me, there's models proving like what the value of this would be on an annual recurring revenue basis. It would be strong, but we've chosen to not do that in part because, Kim and I and the folks that work on the newsletter, this is a volunteer effort, and we all have other day jobs that there are, what do you want to call it? There's it would be difficult to wear the true like journalistic integrity hat and also deploy money or also advise clients or also consult or be a founder, which are roles that everybody that works at ClimateTech VC has, while also profiting from the newsletter. And so we've chosen to not turn on subscriptions, mostly because we want this to be open source and accessible to everybody, even though it's a very high value product. We want that to be free. So, and then sponsorship, we haven't yet really found much alignment with folks that would come on to be sponsors, but there's a chance that maybe we'll turn on a couple little sponsorships to cover operating costs. And then with the jobs board, we left that wide open and free for folks to use for the first 30 days. And we found that companies were literally asking to pay to get a more premium version of the jobs board because it's so useful for them, of like this incredible community of curated top climate talent, that they wanted to pay to, pin to the top of the board or access it or have an easier way of uploading jobs, etc. And so we've now turned on monetization there to, offer some of those premium options. And this is, again, not to line our pockets. It goes straight into a bank account that now means that Kim and I aren't fronting the cost of running the newsletter and the servers and the designers and all of that jazz. So we feel pretty good about that. And then it pays, it actually pays in dividends for our investing work and network building. So Kim is yeah.
That's a good segue to move to my next question in terms of investors. I mean, you have that hat as well. So can you tell us a bit more about like maybe last few previous investment that you did, what make them special, and maybe team, market, I don't know, technology, and how do you source those teams and founders? I'm sure ClimateTech VC is definitely very helpful on that sense. But who should come to pitch you?
Thanks for asking that. Let's see, I'm supposed to be careful about how I talk about this these days. There's some funky SEC rules. So I have been investing as an angel and as a venture partner with some existing funds, and I've been running SPVs on the side. And now I'm picking up the pace on that and putting some structure around what my investment into early stage climate technology businesses looks like. So would prefer to talk with folks on a one-off basis about that. And hopefully there'll be some more public news there about what the structure looks like moving forward. So let's leave it at that. And then in terms of the specifics, yes, of course, lots of sourcing and conversations come through the newsletter. Actually, like probably over half of the deals that I've done have been through some form of direct contact or outreach to people I didn't know before, but now got to know through the newsletter. For example, a company called Therma, which makes sensors to do continuous monitoring of temperature and humidity for application in the cold chain. So think either at quick service restaurants or increasingly in large cold chain like 3PLs and warehouses, where a majority of the OpEx goes into energy for cooling. Therma helps you be more energy efficient through better tracking in extreme detail the temperature in different parts of your warehouse, and therefore taking actions to use less energy to keep products cold and safe for use. So to me, that's like hand in hand climate tech, right? You're reducing your operating costs and you're reducing energy usage at the same time. Really smart founder. And we originally got in contact through the newsletter, hashing out like, how do you think about the space? Is this climate tech? Let's chat about our solution. And got in touch through some investors that would also had on the newsletter as well that had backed the first round of Therma. So maybe that's one kind of wrapped in a bow example. And don't get me started, I'll go all day talking about the rest of the incredible climate tech businesses that I've had the pleasure of investing in. Yeah.
But how many investments do you guys do on a quarterly basis? Do you have like a certain threshold, and what kind of typical check that you put out there? Is like very early stage, like seed, pre-seed, or later stage?
Yeah, so I invest exclusively in climate tech, and I focus on physical risk industries. So think the world's getting crazier, hotter, harder to predict. Where does the rubber hit the road right away? And I see that happening in, I'm biased, agricultural technology, just been on the other side of the table there myself. So love to look at those businesses, supply chain and logistics. That Therma example fits in there. A lot on insurance. I think the insurtech market and the climate tech market will increasingly converge through necessity. But I don't see too many folks like operating quite at the intersection of that yet. So I love to have those conversations. And then, of course, all things carbon markets. So particularly on the verification, measurement, and reporting side, on being the kind of sustainability brain within corporates. I come from the institutional investor side originally. So there's so much white space happening around reporting and climate risk from a financial institution perspective. Those are really the four main buckets that I like to look at, but happy to chat with people as a climate generalist, but I'm less your breakthrough, brand new, new distributed reactor for like nuclear energy production, and more the closer to shifting into the deployment side of the equation.
Okay, so
and
I guess those sectors. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, and then pre-seed and seed. So really love to help folks like come out of the lab and do a lot of talent matching with highly trained functional folks that might have been in a big tech company and now want to work on climate.
Fantastic. So those sectors, those four buckets that you mentioned, are they, according to you, like the most promising for you today in terms of like what I call like impact cash return, or ICR, meaning like building impactful companies while creating highly profitable business? Or do you see any other buckets that you are not looking at, but where maybe investors or founders should look at?
Yeah. So some folks talk about this. I like your framing. Other people will say, where can my capital be the most additional? Essentially, where are the impact financing gaps? And the leading example of an organization thinking that way is Prime Coalition and the venture capital fund that they've built out. And they had ample white space or green space, whatever you want to call it, just a couple, definitely years ago and even a couple months ago. And now with this enormous influx of new funding coming into climate tech, all these new funds starting up, folks are competing for deals. And so just as an example, right, like trying to figure out where's that additionality on the impact side. I think those like fringe areas of climate tech are still CCS or CCUS or carbon to value, anything that's really carbon capture, carbon storage, conversion into value-added products, tracking on the permanent side. That's still very fringe, but also blue tech, so ocean tech. Oceans as a carbon sink, oceans as a source of raw materials needed for the energy transition, like nickel, cobalt, magnesium, silicon, like etc. Oceans as a source of carbon sink through kelp farming, etc., etc. So those are two fun ones that definitely have a really high impact for capital in return.
Fantastic. So in terms of impact, like how do you measure impact in terms of maybe CO2 removal or that has been avoided? Like, do you have any like process or framework, or do you rely on scientists or experts part of your network to drive your investment, or how does it work?
This has always been the question, right? Which is like, how do you define impact, like the impact of investing? And my thesis has always been, and I'd love folks to push back on this, but like, I've been doing this for like 10 years, basically at this point. It's like, if it's climate tech, then it has impact. And climate, I believe, like the reason I'm investing in this area and not instead acting on the policy side or as a activist, right, is that I think that there's financial value to be driven here. And I think that if you invest smartly in the climate tech space, you will drive outsized returns because of the crazy transformations that are happening, economy wide. So for me, it's climate tech is impact. And I do not burden my founders with reporting on particular greenhouse gas impacts, et cetera. I don't have a particular threshold. It's, I'm looking for venture scale returns. I want these to be billion-dollar businesses, all of them. And if they succeed, then we're changing the way that the economy works for the greener. So I take a kind of pragmatist approach to that, particularly because I'm investing at the pre-seed stage. It's a bet on the founder and the market. I would love for some of these climate accounting, carbon accounting initiatives. Prime also has one of those going on. CDP's got one. Breakthrough Energy Ventures has another one. Clean Energy Ventures has another one. Columbia is working on it. All of these folks are trying to quantify the future climate impacts of currently nascent technologies. But I don't think that's the place for an individual fund to be spending their energy. It's the sunshine test or whatever. Like if you have to squint to think that it's climate, then you're not going for the right level of impact here.
Cool. So as you're at the forefront of climate tech, and you see all of those, like new technologies and founders, and building incredible new solution and capital deployed, what would you say to people who are like, kind of like getting afraid of, all of those terrible like news and already like, visible consequences that we see in terms of climate change? I mean, are we doomed, or do you think that there's hope, or what would be your word to them?
Yeah, I talk about this every day, right? Like with folks who have been working on climate for a long time. And there are mental health like implications to that as well, to be in the like doom and gloom and bad news business like day in, day out. But for me personally, working hard and I'm a doer. I like to build things. And so being able to build and be active and be engaged and feeling like I'm participating is definitely a big relief, and like has good health impacts for me as well. But to answer your question of are we doomed? No. But I'm also like a techno optimist, right? So are we in a really bad spot? Yeah, we're in a terrible spot. Are people gonna will the world look exceptionally different from it does right now? Yes. Will we be able to I was gonna say will we be able to keep living the way that we do? Like let's get back to that one, but like will majority of global folks' lives be impacted for the worse? Like, yeah, we're going into really terrible, tough times, and I think a lot of people are going to die or significantly live like worse. Will be living in a worse off way or more dangerous way. Quality of life will go down, but I sit in a really privileged position, and I talk to a lot of really privileged people who are mostly based in, developed countries who have access to high-paying jobs and resources. And I don't actually think that those folks in this current generation, and maybe even the next, will be facing like personally as many of the like horrible impacts of climate change as the folks that probably aren't able to come on the podcast or listen to the podcast or have access to read the newsletter like will. This, climate change disproportionately impacts folks that are most vulnerable. And that's who we're really talking about. And I think Silicon Valley, and I sit in Manhattan, like we need to be thinking about those folks as we're building products and bringing on new services online, because those are the folks that are feeling and will continue to feel disproportionately the biggest impacts of climate change. So Techno optimist crossed with like realist, crossed with like trying to have a healthy dose of perspective on who tends to answer that question.
Thank you. So how can the community of listeners that we have for Tech for Climate podcast can help you today? Anything that you would like to ask?
Oh, man.
Any support that, or maybe you have a long list? I don't know.
Always come prepared with a list. Well, I think probably like that, I just laid that out and that sounds like a little bit doom and gloom, but like my ask would be to keep that perspective in mind while you figure out how you're going to work on climate. So first ask, please work on climate. I think it is incredibly rewarding and I think there's some fantastic opportunities for self-growth and career growth and financial growth as well. So it's strongly, you're not giving anything up by working on climate, and happy to talk through with folks like pathways there for on-ramping or making a transition. We're going to write some blog posts on that because I get asked that question all the time. So please work on climate. Please keep in mind that it's pretty unlikely that you and your family are going to be the ones that are the most impacted by climate. So think about who you're building for. This is a global problem with, pretty unfairly balanced like consequences. And then what else would I say? I mean, would love to have folks tune in and listen to what the content that we put out there. And obviously it would be great to subscribe, but moreover, like push back and tell us what you like and what you think is missing from our content. And we can't do everything. So if it's not a fit for our newsletter, then consider going out and doing your own, or just like you, like starting a podcast and building a community, because we all need to be in on this. And would love to see that and have more friendly, what's the word? Cooperation. I don't know, friendly competition. And then moreover, if you're a founder and you think that venture capital fundraising would be for you, I'd love to help you think through that journey. And I'm sure you can drop my contact information somewhere around or reach out through the newsletter, but would love to hear from you. We need, I think innovation is part of the way that we get ourselves out of this crisis, but it's part that I like to play in. So would love to do that with folks.
Thank you so much. Any question I should have asked you and I did not for this part of the interview?
Oh man. I don't know. I think there's a role for everyone, right? But we're talking about very specific like type of way of working on climate in tech and in investing. But you can work on climate by building or being an electrician and have way more impact than I am as an author or as an architect or as a farmer. Like everybody's going to be working on climate sooner rather than later. So yeah, we're all in this together.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Thank you so much for sharing all of those amazing insights about your personal journey, about what you guys are doing with Kimberly to build ClimateTech VC. It was super cool to hear the insights and know where you guys are going. So thank you so much for sharing that.